Good morning. I'm going to talk to you as individuals. You've all had many years of university behind you. Some of you are teaching. Some of you are young entrepreneurs. Many of you are destined to become future leaders. And you know how to put things together. That's what you've been doing in university. I'm going to talk a little bit about putting distance and time together in terms of the security picture today. So let me start with the obvious statement. You've traveled a very far way to get here. If you've traveled from Canada, you traveled 4,800 kilometers to get here. It took you many hours. If you traveled from Rome, it took you 1,300 kilometers to get to Antalya. I want to start in Antalya now and talk about the security environment and how it's changed. If you Google the distance between Antalya and Aleppo in Syria, it's only 600 kilometers. 600 kilometers from Antalya to this very sad city in Syria, where the Assad regime has thrown explosives out of the back of hovering helicopters onto defenseless population. Only 600 kilometers away have we seen a regime with no respect for human rights. A problem of security for the world, a problem of security for the generation that you represent. This weekend, we saw that the Assad regime's promise to get rid of all of its chemical weapons and to commit itself to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is problematic. And you will have seen that the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons has raised questions as to the seriousness of what's going on in that regime. But let's go only 200 kilometers further, where the Islamic State has created a barbaric arrangement where people are beheaded, intimidated, with no human rights whatsoever, not that very far from where we are in Antalya today. But let's go to another time and space area. The launch time for an intermediate range ballistic missile that can be developed and flown 1,800 kilometers is only 4 minutes. 4 minutes between launch to arrival. NATO has been working on an anti-ballistic missile system for many years, and we are getting close, and this will be announced, we presume, at the summit, to a much greater operational capability of this anti-ballistic missile system. We've been working with Russia on that system for many years in terms of providing information, in terms of reaching out in cooperation. Russia turned us down in that cooperation, despite best efforts to see this as a useful partnership program with Russia. We were turned down. Worse, Russia has now used this as an element of disinformation to state that somehow our ballistic missile defense is targeted against Russia. You see that today, time and space, they're being turned on their head. We're concerned about the proliferation of missile systems elsewhere in the world, and this is being used as Russian disinformation, stating that somehow this system is directed against them. We are not that far, wherever we are, from breaking international law and the violation of international law that we've seen in Ukraine over the last year. The Secretary General has said again yesterday that there continues to be a steady flow of arms from Russia into southeast Ukraine. He's also stated that he is concerned about a capability which remains to launch an attack in Southeast Asia, in Southeast Ukraine, without any real warning. What the ministers are going to be doing over the next 2 days is what you're going to be doing. That is, talking about these challenges and trying to ensure that we are realistic in our solutions to these challenges. At the WILOW Summit, the heads of state and government said 2 things. They were going to be committed to stop the reversal of defense expenditure and to try to grow the expenses back to roughly 2% of GDP. Now I'm going to throw in another fact, because this is what you've been doing for the last number of years. Not only do we have to explain to reluctant populations that we need to spend more on defense, but we need to spend 2% so that we can remain credible. And that's what the ministers, I believe, are going to be discussing tomorrow, first and foremost. Deterrence is based on credibility. If you are strong, if you align your words with strong actions, you will deter potential adversaries. That's what the ministers need to ensure that we're going to be doing as they work on these issues tomorrow. I want to talk about another time element. It takes 2 minutes to drown in the Mediterranean. We've seen a tremendous and tragic loss of life in the Mediterranean because of human trafficking in the area from the north of Africa. We need to stabilize that area, and the Alliance needs to play a robust role in defense capacity building for governments that need this anchor in their governance structure. This is a big challenge, because only 5 years ago in Libya did we try to ensure that United Nations Security Council resolutions were going to be applied, that they were going to be honest, that they were going to help people. 5 years later, we see that in Libya today, the situation has got worse. People are benefiting from this through human trafficking and killing people at sea. But I'm going to close these very short remarks by talking about something that is almost instantaneous. It takes only 30 seconds to watch some of the Russia Today television to see how difficult it is in a world where we're all interconnected to talk about the truth. If you watch Russia Today, after several seconds, you'll see how terribly disinformation is being provided to the world community. An example, Chancellor Merkel went to Moscow over the weekend for the 70th anniversary of the Victory in Europe Day. She, amongst other things, clearly condemned Russia for continuing to fuel the difficult situation in southeast Ukraine. She condemned Russia for the violation of international law. If you watch Russia Today, there was no remark whatsoever about that, but there was a very unfair marriage of 2 ideas. One, that the fascists at the end of the Second World War are somehow the Ukrainian government today, and that the Ukrainian legitimate government is acting as fascists as they try to protect their territory in southeast Ukraine. If you turn on this television and you're not used to watching world events, you are going to get the worst kind of propaganda and disinformation. This brings me to my final comment. It's young people like you who, when you return to your capitals, are going to be talking with other young people about what's going on in the world. And I hope that the next 2 days are going to give you an opportunity to come up with some useful recommendations, yes. But what I'm hoping more than that is that you're going to go back to your capital and talk about what's really happening in the world and the important role that an alliance that's been there since 1949 can play. Public diplomacy, which is what I'm very happy to be doing now, has many expressions. It means having a NATO website. It means having a NATO TV channel. It means using YouTube and Twitter and all of the other social media networks. It means having an office in Moscow to counter Russian disinformation in the Russian language space in Moscow. It means having an office in Kiev so that we can reach out to Ukrainians and tell them that indeed their future is in Europe and that they have to remain true to the values that their country has now underwritten through elections. But public diplomacy, I believe, is also this room in action. It means allowing people to ask difficult questions of officials, difficult questions of each other, so that we get a better understanding, because there is no perfect understanding of security. So I believe that this type of meeting over the next 2 days is really crucial. There are detractors from this kind of model. There are people who say you should be spending all of your money on technology and reaching out to hundreds of millions of people on the internet. But I believe when you get together with 60 people in a room from different countries who are interested in these issues, you come away with force multipliers for the future. So that's why I believe so much that this is an important undertaking. I'm going to close now with my last bit of distance and time. The real ministerial is only 400 meters away. Not too many of you will go to the real ministerial, but when I go over there, and some of my colleagues from NATO go over there on Wednesday and Thursday, we will talk well of this seminar and we'll talk well of the enterprise that you're engaged in, because this youth ministerial has a real role in supporting what's going on 400 meters away. Thanks very much.